The rain was hammering against the tall glass windows of the city's most famous building. It's a grand symphony hall. It was that kind of cold, heavy rain that makes everyone want to stay inside under a warm blanket. But for Alina, the workday was far from over. She was the night janitor there, a job that didn't pay much glory but paid the bills. Alina pushed her heavy cleaning cart down the long, velvet-carpeted hallway. Her feet hurt. They always hurt by this time of night. She had been on her feet since 6 in the morning at her other job, and now it was past 11. She sighed, blowing a stray piece of hair out of her face. The concert had ended hours ago. The wealthy patrons in their fancy suits and expensive dresses had all gone home to their warm houses. Now the building was empty, quiet and smelling of old floor wax and perfume. She stopped in front of the big doors of the main lobby. This was her least favorite part of the job. The lobby was huge, with marble floors that reflected everything. It was beautiful, sure, but it took forever to clean. Alina pushed the door open and maneuvered her cart inside. The room was dark, except for the moonlight streaming through the high windows and the dim safety lights glowing near the exits. And there, in the very center of the room, sat the grand piano. It was a black, shiny monster of an instrument. During the day, it was the center of attention. Tonight, it sat alone, looking almost lonely. Alina walked over to the piano. She had a bottle of glass cleaner and a rag in her hand. Her plan was simple: wipe the dust off the lid, polish the keys if they looked smudged, and move on to the trash cans. But as she got closer, something stopped her. She rested her hand on the cold, smooth wood of the piano. It felt familiar. Years ago, before life got hard, before the money problems started, Alina had played. She played every single day. She was good too. But life has a way of changing things. Responsibilities piled up. Time disappeared. The piano she grew up with was sold to pay for rent. And just like that, the music stopped. She looked around the massive hall. There was absolutely no one there. Just her, the cleaning cart, and the silence. It felt safe. It felt private. Just for a minute, Alina whispered to herself, just to feel the keys. She sat down on the bench. It was leather and creaked slightly under her weight. She placed her fingers on the ivory keys. They felt cool to the touch. She hesitated. Was she allowed to do this? Her boss would probably fire her if he knew she was sitting on the expensive furniture. But she was so tired, and her heart felt so heavy. The music used to be the way she let everything out. Alina took a deep breath and pressed down a chord. The sound was incredible. It rang out loud and clear, bouncing off the high ceiling and filling the empty room. It wasn't just a noise. It was a vibration that she could feel in her chest. My breath woke something up inside her that had been asleep for a long time. She started to play. It wasn't a famous song, or at least not one she remembered the name of. It was a tune she used to play in her head when she was stressed. It was sad but beautiful. Her fingers, which were rough from scrubbing floors all day, suddenly remembered what to do. They danced across the keys, left hand playing the deep bass notes, right hand playing the melody that floated like a bird. For a few minutes, Alina wasn't a janitor. She wasn't a tired woman struggling to pay rent. She was a musician again. Her eyes closed as she let the music take over. She played harder, letting the sadness she felt pour into the song. The notes climbed higher, faster, full of emotion. She forgot about her aching back. She forgot about the rain outside. It was just her and the music. She didn't hear the elevator ding. She didn't hear the footsteps approaching on the marble floor. Julian was still in the building. He was a tall, handsome man who was used to getting exactly what he wanted. He'd attended the gala earlier that evening, but he had left early because he was bored. He had come back down to the lobby to wait for his car, having forgotten his phone in the private lounge. He was in a foul mood. The music at the gala had been boring. People had been boring. He felt like the world was full of fake people just trying to impress each other. He was walking across the dark lobby, checking his watch. When the sound of the piano stopped him in his tracks, Julian frowned. The security guards never played music, and the cleaning staff certainly wasn't allowed to touch the million-dollar instruments. He walked quietly toward the sound, his dress shoes clicking softly on the floor. As he got closer, he saw a woman sitting at the piano. He couldn't see her face clearly at first, just her silhouette under the dim lights. He saw a cleaning cart parked nearby. He saw the uniform. He watched her play. He wasn't an expert on music, but he knew what he liked. And this was actually good. It was raw. It was full of a kind of passion he rarely heard from the professionals he hired. He stood there for a long time, listening, his arms crossed over his expensive suit jacket. He felt a strange mix of confusion and curiosity. Who was this woman? Why was she here cleaning floors if she could play like that? The song reached a high point, the notes rushing down like a waterfall, and then it slowed down. Alina played the final chord, letting the sound fade into the silence of the hall. She sat there for a moment, her hands hovering over the keys, feeling the peace the music had given her. She let out a long, happy sigh and opened her eyes. That was when she saw him. Alina gasped and nearly jumped off the bench. Standing just a few feet away was a man. He was looking at her with a look she couldn't quite read. It wasn't angry, but it wasn't friendly either. I'm sorry, Alina stammered, standing up quickly. She grabbed her rag and bottle of cleaner, knocking over a small stack of napkins on the piano in her panic. I didn't mean to, I was just cleaning. I didn't touch anything. Julian took a step forward. The light from the window caught his face, showing a smirk playing on his lips. He looked her up and down, taking in her worn-out uniform and her flushed, embarrassed face. So, Julian said, his voice smooth and mocking, I see the entertainment isn't over for the night. Alina felt her face get hot. She gripped the cleaning bottle tight. Sir, I apologize. I was leaving. Leaving why? Julian laughed, a short, sharp sound. You were playing better than the old man they paid $10,000 to play during dinner. Alina didn't know what to say. She looked at her shoes. I was just resting my hands. It won't happen again. She tried to move past him to get to her cart, but Julian stepped sideways, blocking her path. He wasn't doing it to be scary exactly. It was more like he was playing a game. He was a man who owned half the city, and he was amused by finding a janitor who could play Mozart. Don't run off, he said. I'm curious. Where did you learn to? Play like that? Did you steal that talent along with the cleaning supplies? The comment was mean. Alina felt a spark of anger in her chest. She looked up at him. He was handsome, sure, but his eyes were cold. He looked like a man who had never been told no in his entire life. I didn't steal anything, Alina said, her voice shaking a little, but staying firm. I played when I was young, that's all. When you were young? Julian laughed again, throwing his hands up. And now, you scrub floors? That seems like a waste of good talent. Or maybe that's all you're good for. Alina bit her lip. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to tell him that not everyone is born rich. She wanted to tell him that sometimes life happens and you have to do whatever you can to survive. But she needed this job. She couldn't afford to make a scene. Please, sir, she said, trying to sound respectful. I have a lot of work to finish. Please let me pass. Julian looked at her. He saw the way her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from anger. He saw the pride in her eyes even though she was standing there in a uniform. For a second, he felt a ping of something like guilt, but he pushed it away. He was bored. And this was the most interesting thing that had happened to him all month. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He flipped it open with his thumb. Inside sat a massive diamond ring. It sparkled in the dim light. Alina's eyes went wide.
This,
Julian said, holding the ring up, was supposed to be for a woman I've been seeing. But honestly, I don't love her. I don't think I even like her very much. It's just business. Merger of families, you could say. Alina stared at the ring. It was probably worth more than she would earn in 10 years. She didn't understand why he was showing it to her. You play well, Julian, said his eyes narrowing as he looked at her. It's better than the people I pay to entertain me. So, I have a proposition for you. He tossed the ring box onto the glossy surface of the grand piano. It landed with a soft thud right next to Alina's cleaning spray. Play for me, Julian said, his voice dropping to a challenging whisper. Play something that actually makes me feel something real. If you can do that, if you can prove that this music is more than just a hobby for a cleaning lady, then I will marry you. Laughed, throwing his head back as if he had just told the funniest joke in the world. The sound echoed through the empty hall, mocking her. Alina looked at the ring, then at the man. She couldn't tell if he was serious or just cruel. But the challenge hung in the air between them, heavy and sharp. "Your move, Cinderella," Julian said, crossing his arms and leaning against a pillar, waiting for her to fail. The little velvet box sat on the shiny black surface of the piano like a strange visitor from another world. Inside it, the diamond ring caught the dim light of the lobby, flashing tiny sparks of fire. Alina stared at it, her mouth slightly open. For a second, she couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. It took a moment for the man's words to actually sink into her brain. He wanted her to play, and if she played well enough, he would marry her. It didn't make any sense. The whole situation felt like a dream, or maybe a nightmare. She looked up at the man leaning against the pillar. He was smiling, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who is playing a game, confident that they are going to win. "Are you serious?" Alina asked. Her voice sounded small in the huge room. "Dead serious," Julian said. He pushed himself off the pillar and took a few steps closer, his hands casually tucked into his expensive pockets. "You see, this ring represents a life I don't want, a wife I don't love, a future that is going to be incredibly boring. But you," he pointed a finger at her, "you just played something that wasn't boring. It was messy and raw. It was actually interesting. So let's make a deal. You prove to me that you have a soul worth knowing, and I'll give you the life that ring buys." Alina felt a hot rush of anger boil up inside her chest, mixing with the embarrassment she already felt. She looked at the cleaning cart parked nearby. She looked at her rough, worn-out hands. Then she looked back at his smug face. "You think this is a joke?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You think my life is a game?" "Everyone's life is a game, honey," Julian said with a shrug. "Some of us just have better pieces on the board than others. You have a talent, sure, but you're stuck cleaning up other people's messes. That ring, that's a ticket out. A chance to never have to scrub a floor again. Don't tell me you haven't dreamed of that." He was right, and that was the worst part. Alina had dreamed of an easier life. She had dreamed of not worrying about rent, of not eating instant noodles for dinner, so she could pay for electricity. But she had never dreamed of buying that life by humiliating herself for a stranger. She reached out to grab the cleaning spray bottle, intending to just leave, but Julian stopped her. He didn't touch her, but his voice stopped her cold. "If you walk away now," he said softly, "you go back to the mops. You go back to the silence. If you stay, you might win. What are you afraid of? That you aren't good enough?" That was the hook. He knew exactly what to say. He knew that deep down, every artist wonders if they are truly good enough. He knew that Alina carried around a secret doubt that maybe she had wasted her potential. Alina looked at the piano keys. They were black and white, waiting for her. She remembered the feeling she had just moments ago when the music took over. The feeling of being free. If she walked away now, she would always wonder what if. But if she played, she felt like she was selling a piece of herself. She thought about her mother, who had worked herself into an early grave just to put food on the table. She thought about the cold apartment waiting for her. She looked at the diamond ring again. It was ridiculous. It was insane. A rich man betting a marriage on a piano performance in an empty hall at midnight? It was the kind of thing that happened in bad movies, but something in Julian's eyes made her pause. Underneath the arrogance and the cruelty, there was a flicker of something else. He looked lonely. He looked like a man who had everything money could buy, but absolutely nothing that actually mattered. He was daring her to show him what he was missing. "Okay," Alina said. The word came out before she could stop it. Julian raised an eyebrow, looking surprised. "Okay, you accept the challenge?" "I accept," Alina said, straightening her spine. "Not because I want the ring, and not because I want to marry you. I accept because you need to hear this." Julian laughed, a short, delighted sound. "Oh, this is going to be good. Don't disappoint me." Alina took a deep breath to steady her racing heart. She turned back to the piano bench and sat down. She felt different now. Before, she was playing for herself, letting out steam. Now she had a mission. She felt a sudden clarity. She wasn't going to play a technical masterpiece. She wasn't going to try to impress him with fast fingers or complicated notes. He had enough fake things in his life. He needed something real. She closed her eyes for a moment and listened to the rain still beating against the glass. She thought about the struggle. She thought about the mornings when she didn't want to get out of bed. She thought about the nights she cried herself to sleep because she felt invisible. She took all of that pain and let it settle into her hands. Alina placed her fingers on the keys. She didn't start with a bang. She started with a whisper. The first note was soft, barely a sound. It hung in the air like a ghost. Then came the second and the third. It was a melody of sadness, slow and heavy. Julian stood behind her listening. He expected her to play something flashy to show off. He waited for the tempo to speed up, but it didn't. Instead, the music began to weave a story. It was the sound of loneliness. It was the sound of a small room with peeling wallpaper. It was the sound of a mother saying goodbye. Alina played with a depth of emotion that surprised even her. She wasn't pressing the keys. She was caressing them, pleading with them to speak for her. Julian's smirk faded from his face. He shifted his weight, suddenly feeling uncomfortable. The music was getting under his skin. It was annoying him. He wanted to laugh it off, to say it was too dramatic, but he couldn't. There was a truth to it that he couldn't deny. He looked at Elena's back. She sat straight, her eyes closed, completely lost in the sound. She wasn't performing for an audience. She wasn't performing for him. She was giving him a piece of her soul, whether he wanted it or not. The melody changed. It grew darker. The bass notes became heavy, like footsteps walking through mud. It represented the hardness of life, the unfairness of it. Julian thought about his own life. He thought about the dinners he attended where everyone laughed, but no one said anything real. He thought about the huge, empty house he went home to every night. The music was showing him a mirror, and he didn't like what he saw. He wanted to tell her to stop. He wanted to make a joke about how depressing it was. But his feet felt like they were glued to the floor. The music was a trap, and he had walked right into it. Alina didn't hold back. She let the anger flow through her fingers. The notes became sharper, louder. She played the frustration of being ignored, of being looked down upon by people like the man standing behind her. She played the feeling of dignity that refuses to break, no matter how hard the world hits you. The sound filled the massive hall. Bouncing off the marble floors and rising to the high ceiling, she was taking him on a journey whether he liked it or not. She was showing him that the people he walked past every day, the people who cleaned his floors and served his food, had entire universes inside them. They had dreams and scars and stories that were worth more than his diamond ring. Julian felt a lump form in his throat. He swallowed hard, trying to push it down. He hadn't felt like crying since he was a small boy. It was a weakness. But this music, it was stripping away his armor. It was finding the cracks in his wall and pouring right in. Alina could feel the shift in the room. The air felt heavy, electric. She knew she had him. She knew he wasn't laughing anymore. She poured even more of herself into the final stretch of the song, her fingers moving faster now, building up to a crescendo that was desperate and beautiful. She wasn't playing to win a husband. She was playing to win her humanity. And then abruptly she stopped. Her hands flew off the keys and landed in her lap. The last note hung in the air for a second before fading into silence. The heavy, deafening silence of the hall rushed back in. The only sound was the rain and Julian's breathing, which was slightly ragged. Alina sat there, her chest heaving, sweat beading on her forehead. She didn't turn around. She was afraid to see his face. Was he angry? Was he bored? Had she made a fool of herself? She waited for the applause. She waited for the sarcastic comment, but there was nothing. Just the silence, stretching on, getting louder every second. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was heavy, like a thick blanket that suffocated the air in the room. Elena's heart was beating so hard she could hear it thumping in her ears. Her fingers were tingling, the feeling still lingering from the keys. She kept her back to Julian, staring at the dusty sheet music stand on the piano. Terrified to turn around, she expected him to laugh. That was the most natural reaction, right? A rich man playing a game with a janitor? He would clap his hands slowly, say something sarcastic like very dramatic, and then leave. He would take his ring and go back to his mansion, and she would go back to her mop. Feeling stupid for thinking she could change anything, seconds ticked by. Maybe it was a full minute. The rain kept drumming on the glass roof, a constant rhythm that seemed to be the only thing moving in the whole world. "Stop it," Julian said. His voice didn't sound like it did before. The mocking, arrogant tone was gone. Now his voice sounded strange. It was tight, almost shaky. Alina flinched. She slowly turned around on the bench to face him. "What?" Julian was standing in the same spot, but he looked different. His arms weren't crossed casually anymore. They were hanging stiffly by his sides. His face, which had been full of smug smiles earlier, was now pale. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He said, "Stop it," he repeated, louder this time. He took a step back, nearly stumbling over his own expensive shoe. "Turn it off. Stop feeling whatever it is you're doing." "I finished playing Julian," Alina said softly. She felt a sudden wave of pity for him, seeing him so rattled. "The song is over." "No, it's not," he snapped. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up. "It's still in here." He pointed aggressively at his own chest. "You put it in my head." "Make it stop." Alina stood up. She was still wearing her stained uniform, but she felt taller than him in that moment. "I can't do that. That was the point. You asked me to make you feel something real. That is what real life feels like. It hurts. It's messy. It doesn't just go away because you're tired of it." Julian stared at her. His eyes were glassy. He looked angry, confused, and incredibly sad all at once. He looked at the velvet box still sitting on the piano, then back at Alina. "Why did you play that?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why did you play like that?" "You don't even know me. I didn't play for you," Alina said firmly. "I played for me. I played for every person who has ever been told they aren't good enough. You just happened to be standing there." Julian let out a long breath, his shoulders slumping. The arrogant billionaire mask had completely slipped off, and underneath, he looked just like a lost little boy. He walked over to the piano and picked up the ring box. He opened it and looked at the diamond. It sparkled, coldy, looking completely out of place in the warm, dusty atmosphere of the practice hall. "I was going to give this to her tonight," Julian said, looking at the ring. "Her name is Victoria. She's the daughter of a business partner. We would make a powerful couple. Everyone says it makes sense. But sitting in that box, the ring is just a rock, and I am just a wallet to her." He looked up at Alina, his eyes intense. "Do you know what she talked about at dinner tonight? She talked about the color of the napkins for the wedding. She talked about which yacht we should charter for the honeymoon. She didn't ask me how I was. She didn't ask me what I was thinking about. She just talked about spending my money." Lena listened quietly. She realized that despite all his money, Julian was living in a cage of his own making. It was a golden cage, sure, but it was still a cage. He was surrounded by people who wanted things from him, not people who cared about him. "That sounds lonely," Alina said gently. "But Julian, that doesn't give you the right to treat people like toys. You can't just buy a marriage, and you can't just throw a bet at a stranger because you're bored." "I know," Julian said. He sounded defeated. I don't know what I thought. I thought I could control it. I thought I could prove that money controls everything, even art, even feelings." He walked over to Alina and held out the open box. The diamond glittered between them. "You won," he said. I felt something, and frankly, it was terrifying. "You've broke through all the noise I've been living in for years. You made me feel alive, and it hurts." Alina looked at the ring. It was beautiful. It represented safety, comfort, and a life without struggle. Any other person in her position might have grabbed it. They might have said, "Okay, I'll play the role of your wife." But Alina knew that wasn't a life she could live. She didn't want his money if it meant losing herself. She didn't want to be his savior. She certainly didn't want to be a prize he won in a game. She reached out and gently pushed his hand away. Closing the box over the diamond, "I don't want the ring." "Julian," she said. Julian looked stunned. "What? But We had a deal. I said I'd marry you. I know what you said, Elena replied, picking up her cleaning spray and rag from the top of the piano. But you don't want a wife. You want to feel less empty? Marrying me won't fix that. And I don't want to marry a man who has to make a bet to respect me. She walked past him toward her cart. The smell of the lemon cleaning spray suddenly seemed very strong, bringing her back to reality. So, that's it? Julian called out, turning to watch her. You're just going to walk away? I have a job to finish, Elena said over her shoulder. And you should go home. Go home and think about why that music scared you so much. Maybe try to fix your own life instead of trying to buy mine. She grabbed the handle of her heavy cart and started to push it toward the far corner of the hall. Away from the piano, away from the temptation of the ring. She expected Julian to argue. She expected him to yell or to threaten her, or to pull out his checkbook and offer her money to stay. Instead, she heard him laugh. It wasn't the mean laugh from before. It was a quiet, confused laugh. You are the strangest woman I have ever met, Julian said. Elena stopped, but didn't turn around. Good, I'm not going to marry you, he said, stating the obvious. And you're right. I'm an idiot. But I can't just let this go. Not the music, and not what you just did to me. Elena turned her head slightly. I didn't do anything to you. You did it to yourself. Julian walked toward her, but he stopped at a respectful distance. He looked at the cart full of cleaning supplies, then at her tired face. For the first time, he really saw her. He saw the dark circles under her eyes. He saw the pride in her posture. He saw a person who had more class in her little finger than anyone he had sat with at his gala table. I have a lot of connections in this city, Julian said, his voice becoming serious again. I own the company that cleans this building. I sit on the board of the conservatory. You shouldn't be working this hard, Elena. Not with hands like yours. Elena raised an eyebrow. Are you offering me a bribe to leave me alone? No, Julian said, shaking his head slowly. I am offering you an apology. And I am going to make sure that talent of yours doesn't die in a lobby at midnight. You might not want to marry me, and I don't blame you for that. But you are going to play on a stage again. I am going to make sure of it. Lena felt a shiver run down her spine. She didn't know if she could trust him. He had been cruel just 10 minutes ago. But looking at him now, she saw that the wall he had built around himself had a crack in it, and she had put it there. I don't need your charity, Elena said, her voice steady. It's not charity, Julian replied firmly. It's an investment. Because tonight, for the first time in years, I felt something. And I owe you for that. We aren't getting married, obviously. That was a stupid joke. But we aren't strangers anymore. You're going to hear from me, Elena. He straightened his jacket and put his hands in his pockets. He was looking a bit more like the confident man she had met earlier, but softer now. Good night, he said. And thank you. Elena watched him walk toward the elevators. He didn't look back. He walked with a heavy step, like a man carrying a heavy load, but maybe a slightly lighter one than before. When the elevator doors closed, the silence returned to the hall. Elena let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for hours. She looked back at the piano. It sat there, silent and shiny. It looked like just a piece of furniture again. But Elena knew it wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a key. And tonight, she had unlocked a door she thought was closed forever. She looked at the empty space where Julian had stood. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if he would really help her, or if he would just forget her by morning. But as she pushed her cart toward the trash cans, Elena felt a tiny spark of hope ignite in her chest. The rain was still beating against the glass, but for the first time in a long time, the storm didn't feel so cold. 2 weeks passed, and life went back to its normal rhythm for Elena. The night at the Symphony Hall felt like a strange dream she might have imagined while scrubbing floors. She went back to her routine. Wake up before the sun, work her first job, come home for a few hours of sleep, and then head out to her second job. Her hands were rough, her back was constantly sore, and the bills were still piling up on her small kitchen table. But something was different. Inside, she felt a small light that hadn't been there before. Every time she walked past a piano in a store window, or heard music on the radio, she remembered the feeling of that night. She remembered the sound of her own voice telling a rich man that she had worth. It gave her a strange kind of confidence. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Usually, she ignored those, assuming they were scam calls trying to sell her a car warranty. But for some reason, she answered. "Is this Alina?" a voice asked. It was crisp and professional. "Yes, this is her," Alina said, holding the phone between her ear and her shoulder while she folded laundry. "My name is David. I am the executive assistant to Mr. Julian Thorne. He has asked me to schedule a meeting with you regarding a scholarship opportunity." Alina almost dropped the phone. "A what?" "A scholarship," the man repeated patiently. "For the City Conservatory of Music, Mr. Thorne has arranged an audition for you. It is quite a prestigious opportunity. The audition is this Friday at 10 a.m. Alina stood frozen in the middle of her small living room. She looked around at her mismatched furniture and the peeling paint on the walls. It felt impossible. "I don't understand," she stammered. "I didn't apply for anything." "Mr. Thorne said you wouldn't," the assistant replied, his voice sounding a little bored, like he said this all the time. "He also said to tell you that he prefers you accept the offer so he doesn't have to come down there and drag you to the audition himself. He can be persistent." Alina felt a laugh bubbling up in her chest. That sounded like Julian. Arrogant, but strangely helpful. He had actually done it. He hadn't forgotten. He had pulled strings to get her a chance she never could have gotten on her own. "Okay," Alina whispered. "I'll be there." Friday morning came faster than Alina expected. She stood outside the massive front doors of the conservatory. It was a beautiful old building with stone steps and tall pillars. All around her were young students carrying instrument cases. They looked so young, confident, and dressed in expensive clothes. They were talking about composers and technique and summer programs in Europe. Alina looked down at herself. She was wearing her best dress, a simple blue one she bought years ago for a wedding, and her only pair of nice shoes. She felt out of place. She felt like everyone was staring at her, wondering why the cleaning lady was trying to sneak into a music school. She wanted to turn around and run back to the safety of her mop and bucket, but then she remembered the piano. She remembered the feeling of playing something true. She squared her shoulders and walked up the steps. Inside, the lobby was grand and smelled of floor wax and old wood. She checked in at the front desk. The woman looked at her name on the list with a raised eyebrow, but nodded her head. "You can wait in the green room," the receptionist said. "They will call you when the panel is ready." The green room was a waiting area with soft chairs and mirrors on the walls. It was packed with people tuning guitars and warming up their voices. Alina found a small chair in the corner. She kept her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. "Alina." She looked up. Standing in the doorway was Julian. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo this time. He was in a sharp gray suit, looking every bit the powerful businessman. But he had a small, genuine smile on his face. He walked over to her, ignoring the other musicians in the room who were whispering and staring. "You came," he said, sounding pleased. "I was worried you would stand me up. You said you would drag me here," Alina said, standing up. She felt nervous seeing him in the daylight, outside of the dreamlike atmosphere of the concert hall. "Why did you do this, Julian?" Julian sighed and leaned against the wall. "Because that night, when you played, it was the first time in a long time I heard something honest. You have a gift, Alina. You shouldn't be hiding it. And besides," he added with a shrug, "I have a lot of money, and I need to spend it on something better than napkin colors for a wedding I don't want." "Did you call off the wedding?" Alina asked softly. Julian looked away for a second. "Yes, Victoria wasn't happy. Her father wasn't happy. But I didn't care. It was the right thing to do." Alina looked at him with new respect. It took a lot of courage to walk away from a comfortable life just because it felt wrong. "Thank you," she said, "for this chance." "Don't thank me yet," Julian said, checking his watch. "The audition panel is tough. They are old, grumpy, and they hate everything. But I told them you were a secret prodigy. Just don't make me look like a liar." "I'll do my best," Alina promised. Just then a door opened, and a man in a headset poked his head out. "Alina, you're up next." Alina felt her heart jump into her throat. The fear came rushing back. She looked at Julian. He gave her a small nod. "Oh, go," he said. "Just play like you did for me. Don't play for them. Play for you." Alina took a deep breath and walked toward the door. She left the safety of the green room and stepped onto the stage of the main auditorium. It was even bigger than the hall she cleaned. The lights were bright in her eyes, making it hard to see the audience. But she could sense them. In the darkness sat the panel of judges' important people, clipboards and stern faces. There was a piano in the center of the stage. It looked exactly like the one at her work. Alina walked over to it and sat down. The silence in the room was heavy. One of the judges cleared his throat loudly. "You may begin when you are ready," a voice boomed from the darkness. Alina placed her hands on the keys. She thought about Julian standing in the shadows. She thought about her late-night shifts. She thought about the struggle and the hard work. She realized that this wasn't just a test of her skill. It was a test of her spirit. She didn't play a classical piece by Beethoven or Mozart like everyone expected. She didn't play the fancy technical songs the other students were playing. Instead, she closed her eyes and let her fingers find the melody from that. Rainy night, she played the song of her life. The sound filled the huge theater. It was raw and unpolished. It wasn't perfect. She hit a wrong note in the second bar, but she didn't stop. She kept playing with such intensity that the mistake didn't matter. The music was pouring out of her, telling a story of survival, of hope, and of finding dignity in hard work. At first, there was shuffling in the audience. The judges were whispering to each other. But as the song went on, the room went quiet. The shuffling stopped. The whispering died away. The only sound was the music echoing off the high ceilings. Julian stood at the back of the auditorium, leaning against the wall. He watched her. He saw the way she held herself, the way she poured every ounce of energy into the piano. He saw the judges leaning forward in their seats, suddenly interested. He smiled to himself. He knew they had never heard anything like this. As Alina reached the climax of the song, her hands were moving faster than she thought possible. She wasn't thinking anymore. She was just feeling. She was playing away the years of silence. She was playing for every janitor, every waitress, every person who works in the shadows and dreams of being heard. She hit the final chord hard, letting the sound ring out into the rafters. She pulled her hands away, and the silence returned. But this time, the silence wasn't empty. It was full. It was vibrating with the energy of what she had just done. Alina sat there, breathing hard, sweat trickling down her neck. She was terrified to open her eyes. She was afraid she would see them checking their watches or looking bored. Slowly, she opened her eyes. There was a moment of stillness. And then, from the back of the room, one person started clapping. It was Julian. He was clapping slowly and loudly. Then one of the judges put down his pen and clapped. Then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium erupted in applause. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was loud and enthusiastic. They were standing up. Alina blinked back tears. She looked toward the back of the room and saw Julian standing there, clapping for her. He wasn't the arrogant man from the lobby anymore. He was just a man who appreciated good music. And for the first time in her life, Alina didn't feel invisible. She felt like a star. Life has a funny way of speeding up just when you think you have it figured out. For Alina, the days after the audition passed in a blur. She went back to her job at the cleaning company, pushing her cart and mopping floors. But her head was somewhere else. She was waiting for the phone to ring. She was waiting for the other shoe to drop. 3 days later, the call came. She was in the break room, eating a sandwich that didn't have much flavor. When the phone rang, she almost dropped it. It was the director of the conservatory. "Alina," the man said, his voice sounding serious. "I have spoken with the board. We have reviewed your performance." He paused for a long time, and Alina held her breath. "To be honest, we were divided. Your technique is not perfect. You have not had the training the others have had. But there was something there. A spark we cannot teach. We have decided to offer you the scholarship. It will cover your tuition and your books. But you will have to work twice as hard as anyone else to catch up. Do you understand?" Alina let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for a year. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I understand. Thank you." She hung up the phone and stared at the wall. She was going to college. She was going to study music. It felt like a miracle. But as the excitement settled, reality crept back in. The scholarship paid for school, but it didn't pay for rent. It didn't put food on the table. She couldn't just quit her jobs and study. She still had to survive. That evening, there was a knock at her apartment door. It was a gentle knock, not the loud banging of the landlord demanding rent. Alina opened the door to find Julian standing there. He looked different than usual. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a simple jacket and jeans. He looked more like a normal person, less like a statue in a museum. "Hi," he said, holding up a brown paper bag. "I brought dinner." "I thought we might celebrate." Lena stepped aside to let him in. He walked into her small living room and set the bag on her small table. He didn't comment on the peeling paint or the worn-out furniture. He just sat down like he belonged there. "Heard the news," Julian said with a smile. "Congratulations." "I got the scholarship," Alina said, sitting down across from him. "But I'm scared. I still have to work. I don't know how I'm going to balance school into jobs." Julian nodded slowly. He took a container of food out of the bag and slid it toward her. "I know. That is why I am here. I have a proposal. And don't worry, this isn't a marriage proposal." Lena laughed, a nervous but happy sound. "Okay, I'm listening." "I own that cleaning company you work for," Julian said. "I just bought it last week. That is why I was at the hall that night, inspecting the property." Elena's eyes went wide. "You own the building?" "I own a lot of buildings," Julian said with a shrug. "Anyway, I spoke to the manager. Starting tomorrow, I want you to work only the day shift at the conservatory. You will clean the practice rooms. The hours are flexible. They will work around your class schedule. I'm also arranging for a small apartment on campus for staff members. It's not a palace, but it's closer to school, and it's free." Lena stared at him. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Julian, I can't let you do that. It's too much." "You don't owe me anything." "I don't owe you anything," Julian agreed. "But I want to do this. Look, you taught me something important that night. You taught me that money doesn't buy feelings. It doesn't buy talent. I was miserable in my golden cage. I thought I could just buy my way through life. You showed me that I was wrong." He leaned forward, looking her in the eye. "Letting you study isn't charity, Elena. It's an investment. I want to hear the music you are going to make. And if I have to move a few things around to make that happen, then I will." Lena felt tears prickling her eyes. She wanted to say no, to prove she could do it on her own. But then she thought about the endless nights of exhaustion. She thought about the bus rides across town. She realized that sometimes accepting help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of friendship. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you, Julian." "Good," Julian said, opening his container of food. "Now eat. You're going to need your energy." Over the next year, Elena's life changed completely. She moved into the small apartment on campus. She spent her mornings scrubbing floors and dusting pianos in the practice rooms. And her afternoons, sitting in those same rooms, learning to play the way she always dreamed. It wasn't easy. The other students were young and had been playing since they were toddlers. Some of them looked down on her, the janitor who was in their classes. They made fun of her old clothes and her rough hands, but Alina didn't care. She knew what it meant to struggle. She knew the value of hard work. While they complained about their teachers, she stayed late, practicing until her fingers bled. She played with a depth of emotion that the other students couldn't match because they hadn't lived through the pain she had. Julian became a regular part of her life, though in a strange way. He didn't go back to his old parties or his expensive galas. He started coming to the conservatory in the evenings after work. He would sit in the back of the practice room and listen to her play. They became an unlikely pair, the billionaire and the cleaning lady. He told her stories about the business world, and she told him stories about growing up poor. He learned that true strength wasn't about dominating others. It was about enduring. She learned that not all rich people were heartless. They didn't fall in love and get married, which is what people in the movies might expect. Their relationship was different. It was deeper than that. They became best friends. They were two people who saved each other in different ways. She gave him back his soul, and he gave her back her dream. The turning point came at the end of the year. The conservatory was holding their annual spring showcase. It was a big deal. Agents and talent scouts came to watch the best students perform. Alina was nervous. She had practiced a difficult piece, complex sonata that required everything she had. Backstage, the air was filled with the smell of hairspray and nervous sweat. The other students were pacing around looking terrified. Alina was sitting on a chair, staring at the floor. "Hey," she looked up. Julian was standing there. He wasn't backstage. Technically, he wasn't supposed to be, but he had used his name to get past security. "You're not supposed to be here," Alina said. Smiling. "I know," Julian said, crouching down so he was eye level with her. "I just wanted to tell you something. Remember that night in the lobby? You played for me. Just for me, I remember. Tonight, don't play for the judges," Julian said softly. "Don't play for the agents. Don't play to get a grade. Play for the janitors who are cleaning the halls right now. Play for the people who are working 2 jobs and are too tired to dream. Play for them." Alina felt a chill run down her arms. She nodded slowly. "I can do that." "I know you can," Julian said. He reached out and squeezed her hand. "Go break a leg." Alina walked out onto the stage. The lights were blinding. She couldn't see the audience, but she could feel them. She could feel their expectation. She sat down at the grand piano and took a deep breath. She closed her eyes. She didn't see the music notes on the page in front of her. She saw the rainy night. She saw the mop bucket. She saw the face of the arrogant man who became her friend. She thought of every person who had ever been told no. She put her hands on the keys and began to play. The music that came out was different from anything she had played before. It was technically brilliant, full of the difficult runs and trills she had studied so hard. But it was also filled with a raw, powerful energy. It was the sound of a phoenix rising from the ashes. The audience went quiet. You could hear a pin drop in the huge hall. The judges stopped writing. The people in the back rows stood up to get a better look. She wasn't just a student anymore. She was a master. When she hit the final chord, the silence stretched out for a heartbeat. And then the hall exploded. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar. People jumped to their feet. The judges were clapping. Alina sat there, breathing hard, a huge smile on her face. She had done it. She looked out into the darkness, toward the back of the hall. She couldn't see him, but she knew Julian was there. And she knew he was clapping the loudest. Alina stood up and took a bow. The applause washed over her like a warm wave. She wasn't the invisible janitor anymore. She was Alina, the pianist. She had walked through the fire, and she had come out the other side with her head held high. And the best part was, she knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of her song.